Hello, good morning, and welcome back to Appreciating Literature. Today we have got a poem titled Ozymandias by P.B. Shelley. And before we go to the poem, we will see about the poet P.B. Shelley. His full name is Percy Bysshe Shelley. Was born on October 4th, 1792, Field Place near Horsham, Sussex, England, and died on July 8th, 1822, at sea off Livorno, Tuscany, Italy. English Romantic poet whose passionate search for personal love and social justice was gradually channeled from overt actions into poems that rank with the greatest in the English language. So he was one of the Romantic poets who gained a lot of fame, and he was acknowledged as one of the greatest poets in English language. The young Shelley was educated at Sion House Academy and then at Eton, where he resisted physical and mental bullying by indulging in imaginative escapism and literary pranks. So while he was studying, he was bullied by his companions. So in order to escape this bullying or rather mental torture, he escaped into writing. Of course, for writing you need a lot of imagination. Between the spring of 1810 and that of 1811, he published 2 Gothic novels and 2 volumes of juvenile verse. Gothic means usually writings which employ elements of horror, like novels like Dracula and all. They are known as Gothic novels. And juvenile verse means poetry for the young people, for the juveniles. In the fall of 1810, Shelley entered University College, Oxford, where he enlisted his fellow student Thomas Jefferson Hogg as a disciple. But in March 1811, University College expelled both Shelley and Hogg for refusing to admit Shelley's authorship of The Necessity of Atheism. So during his university days, he wrote an article entitled The Necessity of Atheism, and when the college authorities found it, they were very angry. So but he refused to acknowledge his authorship. I mean, he refused to say that he wrote this. So both of them, including his disciple, were expelled from the college. In August 1811, Shelley eloped with Harriet Westbrook, a 16-year-old woman his parents had explicitly forbidden him to see. So here you find some of his adventures. First was an elopement with a very young girl whom his parents had forbidden to see. His love for her was centered on the hope that he could save her from committing suicide. So his main idea behind this elopement was to save this girl from committing suicide. They eloped, but Shelley was soon annoyed with her and became interested in a woman named Elizabeth Hitchener. So after some time, he got annoyed, or rather tired of this girl, and he found another woman rather. And she was a school teacher who inspired his first major poem, Queen Mab. The poem's title character, a fairy originally invented by William Shakespeare and described in Romeo and Juliet, describes what a utopian society on earth would be like. So his first major poem was titled Queen Mab, and this character is taken from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Prometheus Unbound, which was the keystone of Shelley's poetic achievement, was written after he had been chastened by sad reality, but before he began to fear that he had failed to reach an audience. So his major breakthrough came with this poem, Prometheus Unbound, because he understood that his poems have not reached a wider audience. Published with it were some of the poet's finest and most hopeful shorter poems, including Ode to Liberty, Ode to the West Wind, The Cloud, and To a Skylark. So you find some of the poems are found in the textbooks in the schools. Shelley and Edward Williams drowned on July 8, 1822, when their boat sank during the stormy return voyage to Lerici. So he died along with his friend on July 8, 1822, when the boat capsized. Mary Shelley faithfully collected her late husband's unpublished writings, and by 1840, aided by Hunt and others, she had disseminated his fame and most of his writings. So after his death, it was his wife, Mary Shelley, who collected all his writings, poetry and all that, and published it. And thus his writings were given for the public. So his fame and name reached far and wide. The careful study of Shelley's publications and manuscripts has since elucidated his deep learning, clear thought, and subtle artistry. So if you go through his poem, what you find is definitely his genius. His very clarity of thought he had, and also very subtle artistry. Artistry means is a mastery of writing here. Shelley was a passionate idealist and consummate artist who, while developing rational themes within traditional poetic forms, stretched language to its limits in articulating both personal desire and social altruism. So he was a master of language. He developed his own style, where he mixed both traditional as well as modern thinking. Altruism means actually trying to help others, selfless service, social service. Ozymandias was written by Shelley as part of a contest with his friend and fellow poet Horace Smith. So this is the background of this poem. He along with his friend Horace Smith had written this poem as part of a contest. Both poems treated the same subject, the statue of Ramses II, that was en route to the British Museum. So they were asked to write about the king, the Egyptian king Ramses II, because there was a statue which was recovered and taken to the British Museum. So that was the background of this poem. The monumental nature of the fragmentary statue and its original inscription were perfect symbols for poets operating in the orbit of the Examiner, a provocative political journal that was daringly critical of George III and the British Empire in general. So he was also associated with the Examiner, a political journal which was highly critical of the king and also the British Empire. So this was an occasion for Shelley to express his anger and displeasure at the monarchy. It is significant that Shelley and also his friend Smith described the statue as lying in a state of desolation in the sands of Egypt, while in fact the recoverable pieces had been collected after a failed attempt by Napoleon by the British in a showy demonstration of imperialism. So this statue, which was found in the sands of Egypt or in the deserts, it was of course mostly destroyed and in pieces. So they recovered all these different pieces of this statue and they are bringing back to England. But then here you find Shelley is describing the statue as lying in the Egyptian desert with nobody to care for. So let us go to the poem proper. Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. So this poem is a sonnet with 16 lines. So it is a very short poem. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert." So here the poem is opening with a kind of anecdote from a traveller. So he is not telling about his personal experience. He is hearing from a traveller who saw something, who saw a statue, that is the two vast and trunkless legs of stone. So that shows the statue was not in one piece. The body was not there, the legs were lying there. Stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. So from the legs, the broken legs is taking us to the face of the statue. Half sunk means half buried. Shattered, of course, mostly in pieces. Whose frown and wrinkled lip. So after looking at the face of that statue, you are able to see a frown. Frown is of course a symbol of or sign of anger, hatred, dislike and all that. Wrinkled lip, again this wrinkled lip shows contempt, hatred towards others. And sneer, sneer again a kind of ridiculing or making fun of other people, that is sneer, of cold command. So from the face we can make out the attitude, the arrogance of that particular statue. Tell that its sculptor well those passions read. So from the face and the expression of that statue we can make out that the sculptor, one who made the statue, clearly understood the person he was trying to represent to the statue, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. That means the expression on the face is still there, it survives after a long time. Maybe thousands of years have passed, but still you are able to read the expression, the feelings on the face. Stamped on these lifeless things. Stamped means clearly engraved on those pieces, broken pieces of stone. The hand that mocked them. Here them means the people. Naturally the king hated the people, and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. So clearly all these words shows the arrogance, the hatred and the contempt with which the king treated his people. and on the pedestal is the stand, the stone which is kind of base for that statue. So there is something written on the pedestal of that statue. Look at the words. So these are the words written on the pedestal, the base part of the statue. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. So this is a very boastful words. So the king is telling, look at what I have done, and all of you despair. Despair means you become hopeless. So after looking at me and my great achievement, you can sit and cry. That's what he is telling. Nothing beside remains. Now look at the contrast here. After all those boastfulness and contempt and hatred, the poet is telling that nothing remains now. That means the king with his arrogance and contempt and hatred is no more. Nothing is remaining. Around the decay of that colossal wreck. Colossal means great. Wreck means the destruction. So the statue, along with the king and his achievements, his pride, arrogance, everything is wrecked, destroyed. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sand stretch far away. So what remains now is just the boundless, means without any boundary. A long stretch of sand in the desert is what we see today. Nothing else remains. So with that we come to the end of the poem. Now we will see the summary and the analysis of the poem. So the speaker recalls having met a traveller from an antique land. Here the speaker means, of course, the poet. So somebody has told the poet about this particular statue, about antique land means, of course, it refers to Egypt. Who told him a story about the ruins of a statue in the desert of his native country. So this traveller is recalling to his mind what he saw in that particular desert of his country. Two vast legs of stone stand without a body, and near them a massive crumbling stone head lies half sunk in the sand. So all this shows the complete destruction of that statue, along with the king and his wealth or power, everything. The traveller told the speaker that the frown and sneer of cold command on the statue's face indicate that the sculptor understood well the emotions of the statue's subject. So the person who made the statue definitely had a clear understanding of the person, the king, whom he was trying to portray in that stone. Here statue subject means the person representing that statue. The memory of those emotions survives, stamped on the lifeless statue. So the emotion expressed in that face is still there on that stone, even though both the sculptor and his subject are both now dead. So the person who made the statue and also the person who represented that statue, both are no more. On the pedestal of the statue appear the words, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." But around the decaying ruin of the statue, nothing remains, only the lone and level sands which stretch out around it. So now nothing else is remaining, only this ruined statue, and also the limitless or boundless sand in the desert. The form of the poem, the structure, how it is made. So Ozymandias is a sonnet, a 14-line poem metered in iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter means actually it has a line with 5 metrical feet. each consisting of one short syllable followed by one long syllable. So, this particular meter has 5 feet with stressed as well as unstressed syllable, or short syllable as well as long syllables. The rhyme scheme is somewhat unusual for a sonnet of this era. So, he has modified the rhyming scheme. It does not fit a conventional Petrarchan pattern. Petrarchal sonnet is actually, it has a group of 8 lines, which is actually octave, and also 2 rhymes, that is ABBA, ABBA, and a group of 6 lines, that is sestet, with 2 or more rhymes variously arranged. So, that is how a Petrarchan pattern it is. So, you have first 8 lines and then 6 followed by 6 lines, that is octave followed by sestet. That is how this poem is structured. By gradually replacing old rhymes with new ones in the form of AB, AB, AC, DC, ED, EF, EF. So, he has slightly changed the traditional rhyming with his own rhyming style. Analysis. This sonnet from 1817 is probably Shelley's most famous and most anthologized poem, which is somewhat strange, considering that it is in many ways not a typical poem for Shelley, and that it touches little upon the most important themes in his oeuvre at large. So, though this poem is actually not typical of his romantic style, which usually deals with beauty, expression, love, imagination and all that, it is dealing with entirely a different topic altogether. But still, this poem has become very, very famous, and many people have published this poem as part of the collection. Still, Ozymandias is a masterful sonnet. So, the way it is written shows his mastery over the language. Essentially, it is devoted to a single metaphor. Metaphor means implied simile, that is the shattered, ruined statue in the desert wasteland with its arrogant, passionate face. So, the theme is very, very simple. Here he is presenting a statue which is ruined, but on the face of that statue you can still make out the arrogance and also the hatred. And monomaniacal inscription. Monomaniacal means obsessed with a particular thing, and the inscription writing is like this: look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. So he is actually insulting the rest of the human race, as if he is the greatest man on earth. The once great king's proud boast has been ironically disproved. So, through these lines, Shelley is trying to disprove or greatly and sharply criticize the attitude of the king. Ozymandias' works have crumbled and disappeared. So, in spite of all that greatness and arrogance of the king, it is no more, it is gone. His civilization is gone. All has been turned to dust by the impersonal, indiscriminate, destructive power of history. So, the poet is actually trying to tell us that a person who is very arrogant and boastful will also be subject to death, and after his death no trace of that person will be found. His civilization is gone, whatever he has achieved, everything is disappeared. The ruined statue is now merely a monument to man's hubris. Hubris means actually arrogance, and a powerful statement about the insignificance of human beings to the passage of time. So, the statue which is destroyed is kind of memento, kind of monument to man's arrogance, and states that compared to nature or the passage of time, we are very, very insignificant. We are nothing compared to nature. We are nothing compared to time, because time is a great leveler, just like death. As time passes, we all have to pass by. Ozymandias is first and foremost a metaphor for the ephemeral nature of political power. Ephemeral means short-lived, not lasting long, whether it is power or wealth, whatever it is. And in that sense, the poem is Shelley's most outstanding political sonnet. So definitely he had been targeting the monarch, the king of that time. So it is a very strong and powerful political sonnet or political poem. Trading the specific rage of a poem like England in 1819 for the crushing impersonal metaphor of the statue. So here he has not been following the rest of the poets compared to the topic. The topic is very, very different. It's not very attractive, not very compelling in that sense. So here there is a crushing impersonal metaphor. That means the statue itself is not personal, it is impersonal. Though there is a person behind, we know that, but the poet is presenting it very impersonally, because he is not talking about the king as such, but he is only focusing on the statue which is destroyed. But Ozymandias symbolizes not only political power. The statue can be a metaphor for the pride and hubris of all of humanity in any of its manifestations. So he is directly or indirectly implying that man's arrogance or pride or boastfulness, whatever you have achieved, will not last long. It will one day it will perish, it will disappear. It is significant that all that remains of Ozymandias is a work of art and a group of words. So what remains now is just the statue, the sculptor's work. That is a work of art, and also the inscription on that pedestal. As Shakespeare does in the sonnets, Shelley demonstrates that art and language long outlast the other legacies of power. Once again, you find Shelley is showing that, just like Shakespeare, that your work, your writing will outlast human power or human wealth. So even after so many years, people go through their dramas or their poems, because that shows the greatness of art or literature. Of course, it is Shelley's brilliant poetic rendering of the story and not the subject of the story itself which makes the poem so memorable. So the topic or the theme that is dealt with is not that attractive, but still the way he has written, that's what makes the poem great and memorable. Framing the sonnet as a story told to the speaker by a traveller from an antique land enables Shelley to add another level of obscurity to Ozymandias' position with regard to the reader. So here he is purposely trying to distance himself from the king, that is Ozymandias. because he is not telling directly, he is telling as if a traveler told him about Ozymandias. So that is definitely done with purpose. Rather than seeing the statue with our own eyes, so to speak, we hear about it from someone who heard about it from someone who has seen it. So this is a technique used by Shelley to distance ourselves from this particular king or the statue which is representing the king. That means the poet has nothing to do with this king or what he represents. He is trying to keep it as far away as possible. Thus, the ancient king is rendered even less commanding. The distancing of the narrative serves to undermine his power over us just as completely as the passage of time. So, definitely the king should have had complete or total power over his subjects during that time, but now he doesn't have any hold, any commanding power. That's what Shelley is trying to tell us. Shelley's description of the statue works to reconstruct gradually the figure of the King of Kings. So you find a kind of gradual revealing of that statue, a kind of reconstruction of the statue from the pieces. First we see merely the shattered visage, the face, then the face itself with its frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. Then we are introduced to the figure of the sculptor. So this is how he is gradually unraveling the figure of that statue, and are able to imagine the living man sculpting the living king, whose face wore the expression of the passions now ineffable. So gradually he is coming to the sculptor who is sculpting that statue. Maybe that time he was definitely trying to make the statue of the king who was living at that time, and also trying to translate the facial expressions or passions of that particular king. Then we are introduced to the king's people in the line, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. So all this shows how he treated his people with contempt and maybe almost insulting them, that in front of the king the subjects are nothing, they are so powerless. The kingdom is now imaginatively complete, and we are introduced to the extraordinary prideful boast of the king. So after picturing the king and his subjects, he is coming to the inscription that is written below, that is, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." With that, the poet demolishes our imaginary picture of the king. So from that boastful king, we are coming to the powerless, completely ruined statue. So he is demolishing that image, the powerful image of that king, and interposes centuries of ruin between it and us. So there is a long gap, many centuries have passed. So that gap he is purposely creating in order to distance the reader from that particular from that arrogant king. So the inscription again repeated here: "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So here you find a kind of paradox. First he is presenting the king as very powerful and arrogant, then you find the destruction and the state of ruin. What remains is only broken pieces of the statue. So, with that, we come to the end of this poem. Thank you and have a nice day.